This fierce dress was once a sketch from Gustavo Cadile. Then he studied fashion and turned it into reality. With guidance, he perfected the skills of draping and merchandising. And now, his collections are worn by celebrities worldwide. Without that first step, this dress would still be a scribble, and I would not look this fierce.
Bring your ideas to life in fashion. With an Art Institute's education, imagine what you could create.
Welcome to Spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with Science Advisor Matt Moniz and the Silent Assassin Matt Costa. The gang's all here. We've kind of shuffled around a little bit, but we're all here.
We are.
Thanks, guys, for braving yet another snowstorm.
Not a problem.
Now, this is a new dynamic trying to work this way, so we're going to try and figure it out as best we can. And if we can make it happen in the correct manner next week, I would be so much more comfortable if everybody was just back where they're supposed to be. And, you know,
But in our usual spots.
Yes. Yes, because first of all, I don't know why, but I'm extremely intimidated to be over here behind the board when you're over there.
Oh, yeah. And I don't have a proper ass groove in my chair. Yeah.
That's true. You got to kind of work it in a little bit. Yeah.
At the very least, I think we should switch chairs next week.
That might work. Now, this one, you know, sitting on this side of things, I have weeks where things go off without a hitch, and we have no problems at all. But I guarantee you that I'm going to flub like 4 things because you're there now.
I'm just staring at you.
Right. You know, it's kind of like that whole... I want to say it's like the teacher-student type of thing, but I don't know. Teacher would have implied that I was listening to you when you were showing me.
I'll just reach over and slap your hand.
That works. Dirt in the chamber.
Just slap your hand away.
We'll get like a little taser that you can just shock me. But we are back. We are here to talk about the paranormal, as we usually are each and every Saturday night. We got snowed out, or snowed in, actually, last week. I wanted to come here and do the show, mainly because...
Would have been warmer.
Yeah, the station had power and heat. And I had neither of those things at my house for about 4 or 5 days. So I did want to come in, but kind of a funny story. I have an all-wheel drive vehicle, and I always try to park it so that if the snow is bad enough and there's an emergency, I can kind of just blast right out of the driveway through the snow. And it's served me very well every time that I've done it, except for last week when all the snow blew up inside the engine block and froze my alternator. Oh. So, yeah. So after I dug myself out Saturday, you know, we wanted to evacuate and get to warmer temperatures. So after I got it all out, I was thankful that I live on a hill and I was able to just push my car out into the neighbor's driveway across the street. And that's where it sat for a few days till I finally got everything thawed out, which I would never recommend putting rock salt on your engine block, but if you have to get by in a pinch, it worked. So, you know, here we are. I didn't have any internet for like 4 or 5 days this week because the power surging, constantly coming on and off, blew out, you know, the main hub in my basement, so I had to have that replaced. So I'm really behind in what we're working on here on the show, but we do have an excellent show planned for you tonight because our guest tonight will be Carla Wills-Brandon, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and also the author of 12 published books discussing topics ranging from topics from relationships, healthy intimacy, sexual healing, self-esteem, sexual trauma, addiction, and recovery to grief, death, afterlife research, and spirituality. And that's what we're going to talk to her about tonight mostly, is the afterlife and spirituality, because her latest book is called Heavenly Hugs, Comfort, Support, and Hope from the Afterlife. And we haven't really covered this topic a lot on the show, and I think that in some instances it gets a little bit too out there, some of these stories that we hear. And it's amazing that we've been able to put these little filters in our minds where, you know, we'll believe somebody that has an astounding UFO abduction experience, for example, or a you know, perhaps an encounter with a demon. You know, we'll believe that. But we hear these stories about people who are transitioning to the other side, and loved ones come and embrace them, and for some reason we seem to dismiss those stories, or we don't seem to place them with as much regard as the same type of connection with the other side as we think going into a haunted location might be. So I really want to explore this topic with Carla Wills-Brandon tonight. And I want to have some of my own questions answered about the afterlife. And I haven't had a chance to read the book again because I had no way to get any kind of digital files this week. And even if I had, I didn't have lights or electronic devices to read them by. But we will we'll definitely have this discussion. And, of course, we'll always welcome your calls. 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. We do have the video up on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. The chat room is going. I don't know if the internet will hold out because we had a few problems trying to get on the air with it earlier, but hopefully that it does. And just on a personal note, too, before we get into the discussion with Carla Wills-Brandon, I want to thank everybody that came out to my presentation at the Wamsutta Club the week before last, in which we raised some money for the Friends of the New Bedford Public Library. And we talked about Ghosts of the Southcoast, and we had a little bit of time afterwards to try to make contact with some of the spirits over there at the Wamsutta Club. I didn't think that we had any luck, but one of the attendees, Christy, actually sent me some files that she recorded while we were trying to make contact, and she thinks she got something. I haven't had a chance to check those out yet, but I will definitely take a listen to those, and we'll see, and if they're playable on the air, we'll do that. But if you haven't had a chance to check out the Wamsutta Club, definitely check it out. Matt Costa and I were there, and we talked with Cindy, the manager, for a little while, and it's really an awesome place, man. I mean, I didn't think it was going to look like that on the inside.
Yeah, it was quite fancy. It's fancy.
And what I like about it, too, is they have different levels of membership. So while you can go out there and get the full membership, which is, I think, what'd you say, $75 a month?
Yeah, I think it was.
And then $50 a month required spending, which is how most of these private clubs work. But if you don't want to go for that membership, you can get the Rounders Club membership, which I believe was just under $200 for the year.
Yep.
And essentially was good for you and a guest, and you have access to the downstairs bar, lounge area. So you'll have your own private bar to go to, and nobody can bother you. You know, safe parking, great parking lot.
Oh yeah. That was also a plus. No parking meters. So.
And what was funny is when we were getting ready to leave, I thought we were going to get locked in because they have those gates. I didn't realize the whole back end was open.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about getting locked out.
Yeah, I guess so.
But yeah, so definitely, if you're interested, check out the Wamsutta Club. It's very affordable, and I mean these days, you know, it's hard to find a nice, quiet place to go have a couple of drinks with your friends. It's hard to find a place where you can bring somebody to impress them. If you're trying to have a business meeting, or if you're trying to, you know, seal a new deal or impress a new client, you know, that's the place to bring them. And when you can rub elbows with the mayor and some of the higher ups of New Bedford, and look like you're important, that's the place to go, to the Wamsutta Club. So. Check them out and join and tell them Spooky Southcoast sent you, and maybe they'll let us get in there and investigate. So, all right. So why don't we take a break here, and while we do that, we'll get our guest Carla Wills-Brandon on the phone, and we'll talk to her about her new book, Heavenly Hugs: Comfort, Support, and Hope from the Afterlife. We'll also talk to you as well. Again, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Those are the numbers to get a hold of us. You can also email us, spookycrew at SpookySouthcoast.com, or jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. Either way will work. We will gladly take your thoughts and comments and questions all night long, and we will share them with Carla as well. So stay tuned for all that. We'll be back in just a few minutes here on Spooky Southcoast.
Your fairy godmother?
In the classic fairy tale, Cinderella's dream comes true because the glass slipper fits.
It fits.
In our world, the right fit can be just as important.
Good heavens, child. You can't go in that.
Especially when it comes to car seats. Always choose a car seat that's the right fit for your child's age and size.
Oh, that does make a difference.
To make sure your little pumpkin gets there safely every time.
How good, dear. Thank you.
Remember, you're responsible for protecting your children. Their happily ever afters are in your hands. For even more information about choosing the right car seat, visit safercar.gov/the right seat. This message has been brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
It takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. The difference between a child becoming one or the other could be you. Studies prove that reading to a child regularly dramatically improves reading skills. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are 4 times as likely to graduate. So United Way is calling for 1 million volunteers over the next 3 years. We're asking you to step up, make a pledge, tutor a child who needs help, mentor a kid who needs someone on their side. Volunteer to read to children. Make a difference. Because when a child advances, we all advance. Entire communities improve. The path to success or failure starts long before graduation day. And the difference between a graduate and a dropout could be you. Be a reader, tutor or mentor. Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Take the pledge. Go to liveunited.org now. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Psst! Hey, over here!
What?
Right here, on the side of the house.
Who said that?
Look down. I'm right at your feet.
Wait, the basketball?
Yes, the basketball. Right down here, where the kids left me a long time ago. Man, you know how lonely it is being a ball and not being able to bounce or roll?
Excuse me?
Remember when you got me for the kids? You said, now kids, you have no excuse not to go outside and play.
Uh-huh.
Wow. I'll miss flying through the air and hearing the shouts of joy when I swish through the basket. What do you say? Could you give me a little air and remind the kids of how fun I still am?
Okay. Oh, wow. You are flat.
Easy, I'm ticklish. Let's get bouncing.
As Native American parents and caregivers, our encouragement to healthy lifestyles for our kids is helping them get outside and play. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov/Indian Country. Brought to you by USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
Hello.
Hey man, you up?
No.
Well, wake up, I need to talk to you. I think your house is haunted.
Hey, come on, it's 2:30 in the morning.
I can't sleep in here, man. I'm scared.
All right, welcome back to Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with Science Advisor Matt Moniz and the Silent Assassin Matt Costa. And before we get into the discussion, we do have an announcement that just came in here to the studio, and that is that tomorrow the New Bedford National Historical Whaling Park the New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park will be delayed in their opening, a 2-hour delay, so they will open at 11 a.m. That's the current plan. That may change, so stay tuned here to WBSM or give them a call in the morning before you head out there, because they are going to be delayed for 2 hours. So, and again, if anybody has any delays or any announcements that they want to make, you can call into us. We'll be here till midnight, so we'll be here. 508-996-0500 is the number. I'm sure there might be a few more that come in during the course of the show. It's just, it's what we have to do here when we're on the air in New England. A lot of people are listening to this podcast version of the show around the world, and they're like, well, what's snow? What are they talking about? If you want, we can send you some, because we've got more than enough. I was telling Carla on the phone just before when we were getting her on the phone line that we had 2 feet last week. We had 5 inches on Thursday night. Now we've got another 4 to 8 coming in. So we're running out of places to put it all. It's not like the old days when you could just dump it in the ocean before we use all kinds of chemicals to melt it. So, but now we just have to endure it. So my shoveling muscles are prominent this season. All right, our guest is Carla Wills-Brandon, M.A., a licensed marriage and family therapist, and again, the author of 12 published books. She is probably a wide variety of topics that we could talk to her about. We need a lot of help with intimacy and sexual healing and sexual addiction issues. That's some of the things that we have problems with. Our addiction to sex being the fact that we really like it, but we don't get it. So, there's so many things we could talk about with her. But we want to discuss mainly her latest book, Heavenly Hugs, Comfort, Support, and Hope from the Afterlife. It'll introduce you to both historical and modern-day heavenly visions of the dying often encounter before physical death occurs. And this is something that's long fascinated me, because I've heard all these stories, and it's probably one of the most I don't know, one of the most common types of... Hello. My fault. One of the most common types of paranormal encounters that you hear from people, but we don't really place it in the same category all the time as we do maybe ghostly haunted houses and things of that nature, Carla. But these stories have been going on for almost as long as people have been aware of the fact that we do pass on.
Well, hello, and I am so sorry that you all are suffering with all that snow. Down here it is a balmy 68. I'm going to feel very, very sorry for you.
Well, it's what we signed up for here.
Oh, man. Every once in a while we get snow down here on the palm trees, so everybody runs outside, takes a quick picture, and, and we got to do it fast before the snow melts, so my heart goes out to you. I've got a friend who's up there right now. She just landed. She's going to see her mother-in-law, and she said that she was, she needed to go get some boots. I live on an island that was visited by one of the largest natural disasters in history. It was the 1900 storm. It was a huge hurricane. It came in here, and it killed 9,000 people. So
oh, wow.
All of us around here, we're pretty used to paranormal activity, and some folks that I know even have pictures of their spirits hanging on their walls. And I know that my house at one time was visited by the past owners, but most folks, and probably some folks in your listening audience, they're interested in this, and maybe they haven't had these experiences, but maybe they've had some of these experiences, which are the departing visions. And what a departing vision is it's this: people who are coming close to physical passing might begin to talk about seeing deceased relatives and loved ones. Now, 200 years ago, death was part of the landscape. It wasn't something that the children were, the children weren't taken from. I mean, I've got folks who come and see me because they're worried about taking their teenagers to their grandmother's funeral. Death in our society is very antiseptic. We live in a death-phobic society. Mm-hmm. But 200 years ago, people typically died at home. They died in their own bed with their own quilt comforter, head at the foot of the bed, and the family and friends around the bed. And so wills were read, disputes were resolved, goodbyes were said, and there was this understanding that there was life after this physical life, and that people would reunite. And so if the dying person began having departing visions, if they began seeing deceased relatives and loved ones, this would be shared with those at the bedside, and it wouldn't be uncommon for someone to say, oh, well, who else are you seeing, or tell Mom hi, or do they have a message for us? So one foot was it was common knowledge that one foot was in this world and the other foot was in the next world. There were visions of the next dimension. The dying knew where they were going to be going. They knew who they were going to be greeted by, and they understood that those individuals that they were seeing were here to escort them to the other side. So this was not a scary experience. Individuals who were not going to pass on, but who cared for those who were about to, could be visited in their dreams. They could receive a dream from the person who was passing. When I was 16, my mother came to me at the moment of her passing, and I knew intuitively that she had moved on. But because we live in such a death-phobic society, I didn't know who to talk about that with. Mm-hmm. About 10 years later, I discovered that a very good family friend of ours had also been awoken at the moment of her passing. And then I found out that another friend outside of him in a different location had awoken at the moment of her passing. And just last year, I found out that 2 more relatives of mine had been awakened at the moment of her passing. So there were 5 of us who woke up as she moved on. Some people will even report seeing orbs at the end of their bed, and these orbs all of a sudden manifest into the physical form of one who is preparing to move on. Other individuals will just see the one who is moving on standing at the end of the bed, like the man who reported seeing his grandmother standing there telling him that she was going to be okay and that she loved him and would always be watching over him. So when people in our society today have these experiences, they don't know where to turn. I mean, when it comes to hauntings and other paranormal activity, shows like yours and some of the stuff that's coming up on TV, of course, I think it's kind of Hollywoodized, but
sure, yeah.
There's a little more information out there. But as far as the average Joe having some of these encounters and then knowing where to go to talk about them, if they go to their physician and say, "Oh, I was sitting here with my father, and my father just talked about seeing his mother and his dad," and the doctor says, "Well, I guess we need to up the anti-anxiety medication. We need to up the pain medication." They want to medicate.
Right.
If someone goes to a therapist and says, "My field is probably the worst," and says, "Well, I was at my mother's bedside and she saw someone standing in the doorway, and then I turned and looked in the doorway and I too saw somebody standing there, and she was calling out to her aunt." She said that was her aunt, and then suddenly this apparition disappeared. And if I tell that, I share that with my therapist is going to send me to the shrink, the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is going to say, "Well, that's excessive grief or excessive, sense of loss. Let's give you some meds." And then, of course, there's the clergy. Oh, Lord, help us all. So we're going to go tell our clergy person that we saw our deceased grandmother standing at the foot of the bed. And I would say probably about 80% of the time, the clergy person is going to pull something out of a religious doctrine to poo-poo that. And so in our society, unfortunately, we don't have any place to go with this stuff. And so, after writing self-help books on all those topics you brought up that I had written a number of books on, I decided that it was time to begin really, really looking at the departing vision. And so I've been doing so ever since.
Well, I think part of what has changed is the way that we view death. And as you said now, we are very death phobic, and there's a change in the process of dying. Whereas opposed to 100 years ago, when it was somebody's time, it was accepted that it was somebody's time, and then the family could gather around. And we have less and less of that. It still does occur these days, but more often than not, we have people trying to be kept alive instead of preparing them to pass on. And maybe in your research, you probably have a better handle on this than I do, but I would expect that there's probably more instances of these visitations in cases where somebody is getting ready to go as opposed to when it would happen suddenly.
Well, that's not necessarily true either, because, I've collected some fabulous accounts where one in particular, a man or a woman, I can't remember which, and I can't remember which book, was driving past a relative's house and suddenly had a scene pop up for them of a funeral procession. And then when they got home, they received a phone call that particular relative had suddenly died. Or the individual who was on the other side of the U.S. had what was called an empathetic departing vision, which involves a person experiencing what it feels like to die, but not actually dying. This particular woman was on, I don't know if she was on the East Coast, but she was on one side of the U.S., and then her loved one was on the other side of the U.S., and she started feeling a crushing pain in her heart. And then it went away. And then she received a phone call that her relative had died suddenly of a heart attack. So what I have found is that sometimes people can even have departing visions up to a year before they're going to pass. I mean, one man shared an account with me. He and his mother used to have lunch every Sunday, and he was having lunch with her, and she let him know that in a year she was going to have moved on. She was going to have passed, and he was confused. She looked very healthy, and he thought she was just goofing around. And then a year to that day, she had moved on. So wow. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and that's why, mainstream media and the scientific community, what they want to do is they want to quantify all this stuff. and you can't quantify it. You can't go into a laboratory and measure this stuff. So here's an example. Now, I work with people also who have hallucinations. I mean, bona fide, way out there hallucinations. And if I see 10 people, if 10 people come to my office and hour after hour they present to me hallucinations, each hallucination is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be specific to that individual, and it's not going to typically involve deceased individuals. It'll involve a whole lot of information, but there won't be consistency from person to person. Now, let's say that 10 people come to me to share with me examples of departing visions. Well, those departing visions will always involve deceased or dying relatives, number one. And number two, there will be some consistency, whether the person is an atheist or religious, whether the person has medication or no medication, whether they die in a quick car accident or a lingering illness. Those will be the differences, but the specifics will always be that there's this takeaway component. This deceased relatives have come to take a dying loved one to the next dimension, to escort them to some sort of, if you want to call it an afterlife, some people call it heaven, but some sort of existence beyond this physical plane that we're all so familiar with. So, though there are some consistencies with the departing vision, they can also, they have their variances too. So, yeah, it would be easy if it was, I know there's a guy in Russia who measures the energy leaving a person who is dying, and what he has discovered, and he discovered this some time ago, and he wrote a book called Light After Life, or it might be Light After Light, I can't remember, but he discovered that individuals who have a lingering illness, their energy ekes out of their bodies more slowly as opposed to somebody who dies suddenly. So, yeah, there's just so much to take a look at here, but unfortunately, there's like a bunch of us who do this sort of work, and we pay dearly for it with the skeptics, as I'm sure you guys have encountered also.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the other things, though, is the emotional toll that it must take on you as well to work with people who have shared these type of experiences with you, and I can only imagine what it must be like to go through the process of dealing with the individuals associated with these stories. We're coming up on the news break here. We have to take a break for the network news, but when we come back on the other side, I want to talk with you about some of those experiences, and I want to talk with you about some of the I don't want to say cliches, but kind of some of the commonly accepted notions of the process of dying that we have come to, I guess, accept through media and through other methods over the years. I want to talk to you about that and find out some of these real life stories and real life encounters that people have gone through, because I've been visited by loved ones who have passed on, mostly in dreams, and now you've got me thinking that maybe I need to get a little bit more worried when I see one of them, that maybe they're trying to tell me something a little bit more drastic. But I want to get into all that and more. And meanwhile, during the break, if you want to check out Carla's website, it's carlawillsbrandon.com. And we will have it linked up on the front of SpookySouthcoast.com as well. Just having no internet all week from the storm made it hard to run the website this week. But when you're there, you can check out all of Carla's books, and you can purchase them there from Amazon. And it's been over a dozen books so far, Carla?
This latest one is number 13, so.
Lucky 13 for you.
Yeah, isn't that a good number?
And just looking at some of the titles, I can imagine that everybody in our audience needs to check out at least one of these titles. Moniz, I know that you could use Eat Like a Lady. No, but seriously, Eat Like a Lady. We have Where Do I Draw the Line? The Fourth Step. Is it love or is it sex? Am I hungry or am I hurting? And then, of course, the ones where you deal with the topics of spirituality, such as One Last Hug Before I Go, A Glimpse of Heaven, and the latest one, Heavenly Hugs. So check that out, carlawillsbrandon.com. And you also have a podcast that you do as well, right?
Well, I used to, not so much anymore, but what people can do is they can go to YouTube, and I've put together a series of very poorly videotaped 3 to 5 minute info. There are little info videos on different aspects of the departing vision.
But all the podcasts are archived up there too. I see if people want to check those out. So definitely check out
They can actually find those podcasts on iTunes for free.
Perfect.
Those past old podcasts.
There you go. And so iTunes, YouTube, and CarlaWills-Brandon.com. We're going to take a break for the news. When we come back, we'll talk more about the afterlife, about these departing visions of loved ones, and we'll also take your calls, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Email us, spookycrew@SpookySouthcoast.com. And, of course, you can jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com, where you can see what's going on in the studio as well. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
Turns to for local news, talk, weather, and sports. WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420, WBSM.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. He's dead, an alleged killer of 4, including 2 police officers, but dozens rallied hours ago outside Los Angeles Police Headquarters in support of ex-LA cop Chris Dorner, who died earlier this week in a mountain cabin fire. The demonstrators say that they don't agree with Dorner's methods, but believe there is police racism, corruption, and unfair treatment.
Dorner did what he did because that's what he felt he needed to do, but I think that's just a little extreme. There's always a peaceful method of dealing with the situation.
Media hunters are headed to the new epicenter of their passion, Chelyabinsk, Russia, to look for fragments of the space rock that blew up miles above central Russia yesterday. A small meteorite could be worth thousands of dollars, experts say.
Scientists are estimating that the meteor exploded with a force 30 times that of the atomic bombs that hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But casualties and damage weren't even close to those 2 cities. NASA geologist Dr. Paula Bull.
Even though there was some injuries and some broken glass and some structural damage to the buildings, basically there wasn't severe damage because it did explode so high in the atmosphere.
Estimated to be as high as 18 miles up. By comparison, the atom bombs that shattered Hiroshima and Nagasaki detonated at less than 3,000 feet. Richard Cantu, ABC News.
The Olympic Blade Runner is due for a bail hearing Tuesday in South Africa, the same day as the funeral for Oscar Pistorius' girlfriend, who is accused of shooting to death on Valentine's Day. ABC's Bossy Kanani in Pretoria, South Africa.
A major South African newspaper, The Beeld, reports the first neighbor and security guards to arrive at the scene saw Pistorius trying to revive Steenkamp using CPR after she was shot with a 9mm pistol 4 times through a bathroom door. Pistorius' friends believe he mistook her for an intruder.
The Pakistan Taliban is claiming responsibility for today's explosion at a vegetable marketplace in Quetta, Pakistan, which killed at least 65 people. You're listening to ABC News.
Want to really clean up this spring? Then lose that nasty carpet at Lumber Liquidator's spring flooring sale. Clearance flooring is an incredible 19 cents a square foot. First quality laminate is just 39 cents a square foot. Pre-finished bamboo is up to 40% less. Pre-finished solid exotic hardwood up to 28% less. Plus get special extended financing. Spring flooring sale ends Tuesday. So visit lumberliquidators.com or get to your local store for your flooring deal today.
Introducing a faster way to push-to-talk. AT&T Enhanced Push-to-Talk. AT&T delivers more of what your business needs. Instant communication, up to 1,000 contacts, plus a broad array of devices and platforms. Visit your local AT&T store or call 1-877-981-3359 to get your business started today. You push-to-talk, we pushed it further. AT&T, rethink possible.
New activations only requires 2-year commitment to eligible voice and data plans plus activation of AT&T Enhanced Push-to-Talk service.
As Pope Benedict prepares to step down, the big question is, when will the conclave of cardinals meet to start selecting a new pontiff? ABC's David Wright in Rome.
The Vatican, for the first time today, suggested that it may be sooner than we had all been expecting. They've told us up until now that it would start no sooner than March 15th. They're now saying that if a lot of cardinals are in town and they want to start it early, they can get it done.
Some gay rights groups are trying to bolster the confidence of gay teens after a teacher in Sullivan, Indiana, said that she believes gays have no purpose in life. A You Have a Purpose Facebook page has been set up to collect videos submitted to encourage gay youth. This is after some folks in Sullivan, including some high schoolers, proposed holding a non-school sanctioned traditional prom that would ban gay students. The teacher's remarks caused a lot of internet chat. Another state could make you wait to split up.
We now pronounce you husband and wife.
But when it's time to call it quits, a measure before a Washington State Senate committee would extend the waiting period for a divorce to become final from 90 days to a year. 3 other states, Ohio, South Carolina, and West Virginia, now require a year-long wait to finalize a divorce. Supporters say it would give couples more time to reconcile and would result in fewer divorces. But opponents say the Senate bill is overly intrusive and has few provisions for domestic violence. Joan Bennett, ABC News.
This is ABC News.
Homeowners, in today's world, no neighborhood is immune from burglaries. Get a state-of-the-art monitored home security system for Protect Your Home, your authorized ADT dealer, and get peace of mind today. Call right now, 1-888-213-2244, 1-888-213-2244. Local permit fees may be required. License number CAACO 6320, KY City of Louisville 483, and FLEC 130033427. Call for additional numbers. Call now, 1-888-213-2244.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
So, Jacqueline.
Yes, Mom?
I wanted to talk to you about something, and... Oh, wait, hold on. I just got a text. Oh, there's another one. Wow. Busy me. So, anyway...
Oh, wait, Mom. I just got a message. My friends keep commenting on my comment. Oh, there's another one. So many comments on my comment.
Oh, I can't wait to watch TV tonight. Playoffs!
Hey, guys, check out my new video game. Wait, Mom, what? Huh?
What? Hold
What'd you say? Wait a second, what?
This weekend, unplug. Take your family to the forest. There's nothing in the world like experiencing nature firsthand. Trees, paths, bluebirds, streams. Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. To find the forest nearest you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Welcome to spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSN presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts, Tim Weisberg and Matt Tosca.
And science advisor Matt Moniz. We talk about the paranormal each and every Saturday night, except not next Saturday night. We won't be here. It's funny, we've had like 3 weeks off, week on, week off, week on, week off. You know, it's it's like we're actually paid employees of a radio station with all this vacation time we've been taking for ourselves here. But no, actually, we're not going to be with you next week because we have a Legend Trips event. We'll be at the Lizzie Boyd Bed and Breakfast for Dead of Winter 2013, which of course is sold out. For everybody that is attending that, though, the rooms have now sold out in the house, but we do have a local room deal available at the Hampton Inn of Westport, Fall River. If you do need to get a room, just shoot me an email, tim@spookysouthcoast.com, and I will send you the information so that you can book a room at that rate. And also, I'm working on finalizing the plans this week. It was going to be done last week, but of course I had no computer, where we're going to be finalizing the room deal for our event, Haunting the Houghton, which will be April 5th through the 7th at the Houghton Mansion in North Adams, Massachusetts. There's a big problem trying to get a hotel. I wish I had actually been involved in the planning stages of selecting the date for this event, because I had a lot of valid points I would have brought up. Like, it's still ski season in April in the Berkshires. And so, as a result, it's been very hard to find a hotel that we can put everybody in. So we might have to be spread out over a few different hotels, but we're working on securing deals at a couple of them so that you can save some money and not have to pay what is actually a pretty high rate because it's still the ski season up there. So we're looking at maybe right around $112 a night for the rooms, which is a phenomenal deal if you've ever gone up there and stayed. It's usually like $160, $180 a night. So we've been able to get some rooms at around $112 to $120 a night. So we'll have an announcement coming up about that soon. But meanwhile, it's not too late to get your tickets to Haunting the Houghton. If you go to legendtrips.com, you can purchase your tickets. They are just $149, and that's going to get you into the Friday night meet and greet and paranormal party at the hotel. There'll be presentations by Jeff Belanger, Ron Kolick of the Ghost Chronicles podcast and New England Ghost Project, myself, and more. There'll be question and answer sessions with the speakers. And on the night of the investigation at the Houghton Mansion, you'll get dinner. You'll get 5+ hours of ghost hunting throughout the mansion. And then I'm sure on Sunday morning we'll all get together and have a little bit of brunch, because that's one of my requirements of any hotel is they have to have some kind of a breakfast. Because everybody that's involved with the event wants to meet up the next day and talk about their experiences.
Like a continental breakfast, or just it's got to be hot?
Yeah, well, it's probably just going to be a continental breakfast, because it's hard to get more than that. But when we stayed at the Comfort Inn after the Slater Mill event, I mean, they had a pretty decent continental breakfast there. Yeah, I mean, you know what they have at most of these now? Make your own waffle stations.
Get out.
Yeah, you press a button and they pour the batter into a cup, and then you pour the cup into the waffle maker, flip it, and 3 minutes later you've got a delicious Belgian waffle.
That's outrageous.
I know. And that's included with your hotel room when you purchase the hotel room.
Wow.
So, but meanwhile, if you want to get the $149 ticket to the event itself, you can do so by going to legendtrips.com. Click on the link for the Haunting the Houghton event. Again, it's Friday, April 5th through Sunday, April 7th. It's our first ever multi-day event, and we'll have some fun on Saturday too.
I've never been to the Houghton Mansion. It's quite a big place, isn't it?
It's a good-sized place. I've been in it several times, and I've had physical objects move in the place on me right in front of several other people. It definitely produces a lot of paranormal activity, whether the place has just got a few people in it or a whole, building full. So
there's going to be plenty of room for people to run around.
It is quite spacious, yes.
Right.
And of course, Josh Mantello of Berkshire Paranormal Group, who is headquartered out of the Houghton Mansion, will be there as well. He's going to be part of the event, and he'll be part of our staff for that night. So we'll be able to not only hear some of the stories, but he'll know all the hot spots of where the activity is. So it's again, it's going to be quite a unique weekend event. It's our first ever multi-day event. Haunting the Houghton at the Houghton Mansion in North Adams, Mass. Friday, April 5th through Sunday, April 7th. Just go to legendtrips.com if you want to buy the tickets. And for those of you who are just getting your tax returns back, and you're looking for a paranormal event to go, or a weekend away even, this is the event for you. Also, though, if you haven't got your tax returns, or if you're not getting one and you don't really have the cash or the funds to buy these tickets, PayPal now offers a special deal for people who purchase tickets to our events. You can use the Bill Me Later plan, and you can actually stretch the payments out over about 6 months.
Good. I've used that before. It's really good.
So you don't have to actually shell out the $149 all at once. You can kind of make monthly
it's
payments.
Really easy.
And it's
I
good.
love PayPal. If PayPal was a person, I'd give them a high five. They do a good job.
They do an excellent job, and they do a great job with our events of making sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. So, again, please, if you want to get the tickets, do it soon, because as people are getting their tax returns back, those tickets are going to go fast.
And people can buy these tickets as gifts for other people.
Right. And that's we have a lot of people that do that for our regular attendees. We've really built a great family up at these Legend Trips events. So I know that the first dozen or so tickets that we sell to every event are going to be to the same people, because we've formed a bond with them. And I think that's part of the reason why we have so much activity happen on these things, because we've got a good mix of the right people.
Can we get gift certificates available for people for future events when we do this one?
We can talk about it. Again, Moni's throwing things at me on the air instead of
you have to decide
talking
now.
about them.
Wise Greg.
No, we've actually talked about some different options. Jeff and I have some different programs that when we start doing these on a more frequent basis, maybe having the idea of like a season pass and things of those nature. So
well, the reason I brought this up is other people have talked about that at events. So.
Well, I mean, you can always purchase the ticket through legendtrips.com and through the PayPal there, and just make a note that it's for somebody else. And we can handle that. Or just shoot me an email when you buy the ticket. And because, like I said, people buy tickets for them all the time. So we can certainly accommodate anybody in any way that they desire. We even get vegan pizzas. I mean, come on. That's how much we're willing to please.
Vegan pizzas?
Yes.
Any gluten-free?
We'll suffer through vegan pizzas. We get gluten-free if required.
So does that mean you can get meat salads for non-vegans?
we
Meat
could
salad.
try.
Isn't that just a pile of meat?
It
in a
sounds
bowl?
it sounds kind of gross, actually.
It does. It
All
sounds
right.
like sounds like a bad '90s band, or a good '90s band.
It could have been a good '90s band too.
Meat salad.
I think it's one of the bands that Moniz used to do sound for. That's why I came up with it. All right, let's get right back into the discussion with our guest tonight, Carla Wills-Brandon. And Carla, we were having some fun there talking about the Houghton Mansion event that we're doing, but the Houghton Mansion is one of these typical stories that we hear in the paranormal of tragic tales. A.C. Houghton lost members of his family in a car accident, and he died of a broken heart not long after. And we hear a lot of stories about people who have that type of connection, the husband and wife who are married for 50 years and never leave each other's side, and then when one passes, the other one passes. What is it about the closeness of people that we can allow that to have a physical effect on our lives?
Well, the bottom line is we're here to spiritually evolve. And the way we spiritually evolve is by having relationships with other people. And relationships are really rough. I mean, trials and tribulations, geez, I see it all the time. My husband he's a clinical psychologist, and he and I work with couples as a couple, and he and I have been together for a while, so of course we've had, our share of knockdown, drag out. I mean, and then, of course, if you have kids, there are some more relationships. And so, relationships basically force us, if we are willing to, they force us to take a look at ourselves. And when we can take a look at ourselves, we can take a look at our warts, and we can also take a look at those aspects of ourselves that are really good. So when we're in a decent relationship with somebody and we've kind of gone through all of the ups and downs of that and made it through all that and gotten to the other side. A lot of people today, nowadays, they don't know how to fight. And so they bail on a relationship way too soon, as opposed to getting some help and learning how to, have a decent, healthy fight, respect boundaries, all that wonderful stuff. And so when a couple can make it through all that, there is when we meet someone for the first time, what attracts us is lust. If we didn't have lust, we wouldn't have humankind. I mean, that's the breaks. That's the way it is. And so what happens is that over time, as that lust begins to wear off, the hormone for lust begins to wear off a little bit. And so most people begin to think, oh my gosh, we're not in love anymore, so let's, ditch this relationship and move on down the line. Well, if we can stick it out, what happens is that a new hormone steps in, and it's called the intimacy hormone. And so it changes every aspect of the relationship. It's not only does it make sex better, but we learn how to communicate better. We can have fights and know that just because we disagree and have a fight, that doesn't mean the end of a relationship. So when you have that kind of intimacy for those many years, what happens is that there is a bond. There's a spiritual bond that is formed between individuals, and you begin to spiritually evolve together. And so when one passes on, there is this sense of, and working with widows and widowers, widows and widowers report something called the after-death communication, which is very different than the deathbed vision. The deathbed vision is something that happens before death. An after-death communication is an experience where we make contact with somebody we care about after a passing, where relatives, loved ones can come to us in dreams. They can manifest and appear fully physical before us. And so what a lot of widows and widowers have shared with me, they've shared with me how they have seen their physically deceased partner. I just heard someone say it again tonight. Where they have seen their deceased loved one around the house. My godfather, who was your basic meat and potatoes, German from Russia kind of guy, very old school, wouldn't know what a New Age magazine was if you hit him on the head with it. When his wife passed, he started talking about seeing her around the house. And so a lot of these couples will talk about that. Some couples will decide that they need to stick around because of the children or the grandchildren. But then you have other partners who, within a 5-year period of a passing, they will move on too. It's almost as if they set into motion unconsciously the switches that set the stage for a passing. So, all of this is very, very interesting. But the after-death communication, probably a lot of people in your listening audience have experienced that. When my grandmother passed, I had a dream. I was just grieving her horribly because she took the place of my own mother when my mother passed. And in a dream, she came to me, and the colors were very, very vivid. And that's what a lot of people will talk about when they have an afterlife or a departing vision experience in a dream form or an after-death communication. The colors are vivid, just like the near-death experience where somebody comes close to dying, they leave their body, they go through the tunnel, they reach the next dimension, they reunite with deceased loved ones or guides, and they talk about how the colors are very bright, and then they come back. They don't, in essence, pass.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandmother, she came, she walked in, grabbed me by the shoulders, shook me by the shoulders, and said, "Get over it." and that was so like her, And so people can have these after-death experiences also where somebody comes, whether it's a deceased parent, grandparent, sibling, partner. But the thing that's so interesting about partnerships, there was an article that came out in a newspaper in Pennsylvania, I think it was maybe last year, and in that article, I included it in the latest book. In that article, there were a couple who were very devoted to each other, and they had raised children, and they had been through the trials and tribulations, and then he was a truck driver, and then she went on the road with him, and they just had these wonderful adventures, and he became very, very, very sick, and so he was in a hospital, and while he was in a hospital, she suddenly became ill, and so she was hospitalized. Well, she passed away, and he was not told of her passing, and when it was time for him to pass, guess who was there to greet him? It was his wife who had moved on. So there's this wonderful, wonderful article, and in this story it talks about how he is saying to her, "Pull me up, pull me up, pull me up, hold on tight, pull me up." And what he's saying to her is, pull me on up with you, pull me on up out of this physical body so that I can be with you. So the bond of love is I think that's what we're really here to learn about. And so when you have, I know in your field, what you're looking at is you're looking at people who have some, they're in the spirit, but they have some real unfinished business, and so they're sticking around. And we take ourselves to the other side. So if I was kind of a miserable, nasty person on this side and never could make peace with anything on this side and had a lot of unfinished business, and let's say something horrible and horrific happened to me and my passing was very, very tragic, and I found myself in a spirit body, and I didn't want to believe that I really was dead. We had, I had a 100-year-old office house, and we had several spirits in that house. We had some children had passed away in that house tragically, and so I'd be seeing clients in my office, and I'd hear somebody running up and down the stairs, and nobody else would be in the house, or the swing in the back would start moving when there was no breeze. But there was this one really crabby spirit who I had this one 6'4" Danish client who I had left up in my office, and to kind of gather himself, we had done some intense work, and I came downstairs to take care of some business, and the guy came flying down the stairs, and he said, "You're not going to believe what I saw upstairs." And he described a very angry older man who had manifested and scared him to death. So, I think that we take ourselves to the other side if we haven't worked through a lot of our business that we're here to work through. what's going to happen for us is that we're going to take that with us. But also, as I said earlier, the bottom line is we're supposed to be learning about not only loving ourselves, but loving others, because others really are a mirror of who we are. And working through those issues and problems and dynamics. And, some folks, reincarnation experts, say that we reincarnate with a soul group. And as Bob Monroe said once, Bob Monroe was the famous out-of-body explorer who started the Monroe Institute. As he said, people would switch roles, and I'll be the dad this time, and you can be the son, or you can be the mother, and I'll be the grandparent. But we are here to learn something. And so I think that, unfortunately, the only thing that changes, to be honest with you, is the scenery. And that just becomes more vivid. In some instances, you will have some folks who will create a reality for themselves on the other side that is difficult or depressing, or it's based on where they are at. Mm-hmm. Or you have these earthbound entities that you guys run across who aren't real sure what's up, what's down, am I dead, am I alive? And they'll hang around and they'll be crabby like the spirit that was in my 100-year-old office house. But I have to say that the most rewarding experiences are seeing those reunions. Those reunions are really, really something. I usually end up sitting there with a box of tissues, sobbing my eyes out, and just in awe in amazement, in witnessing these experiences of individuals who thought separation was forever, and then they discovered that it wasn't.
And we do deal with a lot of people who have lost a loved one, and the person still on this earth has unfinished business. They still have feelings of regret and sorrow about the loved one's passing. And more often than not, we find that through that's why they're trying to make that connection with them through the afterlife, whether it be, going to see a spirit medium or even trying to investigate and make contact within their own home, perhaps. And I've seen a lot of people who are weighted on by that. And what you're talking about, we've seen that too, where somebody can finally make that connection with somebody who's passed on and realize, all the stuff that I'm holding on to, they don't see as important anymore. And it's about the love, and it's about the connection more than it is about whatever that last little fight was that they had.
Well, you're so right. I mean, I think that I had a friend who passed away. This guy had an amazing life. He was part of the Mexican cartel, first of all. Mm. I mean, he was really, really not a real nice guy. And he had a sort of, I'll just say, a spiritual awakening. And when he got out of prison, he really turned his life around. And he became someone who was very devoted to taking care of other people. And so what we had was a fundraiser for his family, because the family was not real wealthy and they needed some help in paying expenses. And he actually passed in his home. And one of his relatives was talking to me about how guilty she felt that he had passed in the home, and that she thought she wasn't disturbing him, but that she now felt guilty because she felt like she should have disturbed him. Maybe she could have helped him. What I had to say to her was, he was so devoted to you guys that he wanted to pass without upsetting you. He didn't want you to be up there with him. He wanted to do this as easily and as gently as possible for you guys. And so he wouldn't want you to feel guilty right now or to be upset about it. He passed exactly the way he wanted to pass. There was another account that involved departing vision, as a matter of fact, that a very famous near-death experience researcher, it was one of his kiddos that he worked with, and this child was in the process of passing, and the family was circling around him and praying like mad for him to get well, get better. And finally what happened was during a dream, the minister had a dream about this child, and the child had come to him and said, "Could you please tell my family to quit praying? They need to let me go." And so once the minister delivered this to the family, and the family, they thought they were doing the right thing. But once the family realized that this was the wishes of the child, they stopped and they just spent time with him and loved him, and then he was able to gently move on. So, I mean, if I'm real codependent and I can't let go of my physically dying relative, boy, I have seen this a gazillion times. That physically dying relative is going to try to stick around for as long as possible. If there is unfinished business, or if there is concern or worry with regard to surviving children, partners, also those in spirit will hang around, or they'll spend a lot of time hanging around because those bonds are not broken just because the physical body disintegrates. And I think that so many people in our culture nowadays, there's huge focus on materialism. All we have to do is turn on the television. And there's huge focus on looking a certain way and behaving a certain way, and there are these delusional thoughts about what's really important in life. And the bottom line is that it's about our relationships, and it's about love, and it's about understanding that these relationships don't end. I mean, what would our society be like if there wasn't this monumental fear of physical dying? Seriously. I mean, I think it would absolutely change society. But unfortunately, so, let's say 500 years ago, guys going into battle, they knew that they were probably going to die. And so, but they still went into battle anyway, because that was for the love of their country, the love of their community, the love of their family.
But also too, though, because death was kind of around every corner anyway. Whereas opposed to now, where we, like you said, we've become death phobic. We think that we're insulated from it now. But back then, you were probably more spiritually attuned because you realized the brevity of life.
Well, people also were more aware of, years ago, what I did is Raymond Moody is a famous near-death experience researcher. He's like the godfather of everybody.
Right, yeah.
You know who he is. So
Life After Life, yep.
Yeah, so in the 70s, he wrote his first book about his research into near-death experiences. Probably about 15 years ago, maybe, give or take. He had invited several of us, myself, a physician from Florida who researched hellish near-death experiences, where she learned that people who have scary near-death experiences have those types of experiences because in the end they end up being a good thing and people learn from them. Another physician from New York, massage therapist, a few other people, we were all invited to meet at his house to study what was called mirror gazing. He had built what are called psychomantiums in his home, which were basically pitch black, dark rooms with a chair and a mirror. That was it. And it was based on the old philosophy of mirror gazing. In ancient culture, what the mystics used to do is they would go down to the water, they would put water in a bowl, and they would gaze into that in order to make contact with the afterlife.
Scribe.
And so he got very, very into all of this. And so he had Diane Sawyer out there, and it was just a really big deal for him. So I thought, well, I'm game. I'm going to go on out there. So I went out there, and I went into the first 3 psychomantiums and didn't experience much. I had my grandmother had passed, and I was boo-hooing and crying and upset about that. But I didn't have anything paranormal happen at all. And so we had a light dinner. Of course, no drinking, no drugs, I don't smoke, so nothing mood-altering at all was allowed. But I was planning on just going to bed, and then something nudged me to try to go into the fourth one. And so I went into the fourth psychomantium, and I sat down, and it was pitch black, and I almost fell over myself just getting to the chair. And I could actually hear Raymond in the next room talking about, some domestical, I don't know, laundry or or garden or something around his house. And all of a sudden the temperature in there dropped. I mean, it just dropped, and I got very chilly. And what began to come out of the mirror would be described as orbs and vortex sort of light, and kind of first started out sort of like a mist, smoke, luminous light, and then quickly became orbs, lots of different orbs. And it just took me totally by surprise. I became very scared, and so I started saying to myself, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? And then one of the facilitators came by, and she just checked on me and asked if I was okay, and I told her what was going on, and she said, well, do you want to end your session? And I said, no, I think I'm going to stick it out. And so she left, and so as soon as she left, the temperature dropped again, and all of a sudden there were these orbs coming at me, through me, and I experienced the most overwhelming sense of love. And at that moment, I knew that all of my deceased relatives were there with me, that they were always with me, and that they were watching over me. After that experience, I wasn't able to really talk about it for probably 4 years. I didn't know how to put it into words. When I got home, I think I shared it maybe with my husband. I wrote it out, and then I just I didn't know what to do with it at all. But what that taught me was, I learned very, very quickly that like I said before, the scenery may change, but the bonds of love remain, and that our deceased loved ones are always with us. So I think 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and beyond, back in time, yes, as you said, death was part of the landscape, and so people were more in tune to these sorts of things. We grieve, of course. Don't get me wrong. We grieve the separation. It would be like my best friend moving from here to Italy, and I'm not able to go next door and have tea with her, and it's harder to communicate with her, and the relationship changes, so I'm going to grieve the way it was. But as far as relationships disappearing, they don't disappear. But I do think it's just very, very sad that the skeptics out there will do backflips trying to prove that anybody who is looking into this is either a nut or I was called, a witch, a New Age nut. I don't know.
Those are all badges of honor. Those aren't those aren't discrediting names. Those are badges of honor in this field. But one of the things that we have, we've had people come on the show before and talk about the process of dying, and quite often it's from a skeptical point of view. And we actually had one gentleman who came on, I can't remember his name, but we talked about the process of dying with the idea of seeing the light and going down the tunnel. And he described this as the process of your body shutting down. And he basically explained away these experiences that people report through a scientific lens. But I'm guessing from your research and from the people that you've discussed with, that journey is a lot different than something that can easily be explained away as just, the cells going into the process of dying.
These people, I just want to line them all up and slap them.
If you want to do that would make a great show. We would.
Man, oh my gosh, it's like they're so sanctimonious. Okay, I have a really good friend. His name is Erlingert Haraldson, and he and his buddy Carlos Osis were the first, really the second individuals to categorize and really look at scientifically as much as possible the departing vision. And there was a guy named Sir William Barrett. He was the first. He was married to a woman who was a gynecological surgeon. And she began to notice that when her patients began to die, that they would begin to talk about seeing deceased relatives and loved ones, the light. And what they would also talk about is they would talk about seeing people who they didn't know had passed. so someone would pass, and the family would decide that they weren't going to tell this loved one who was ill that this friend had passed because they didn't want to upset them. And I have modern day accounts of this also. And so as these individuals are preparing to pass, for example, I'll just give this one really quick. A man was in a nursing home. He was very, very ill. He couldn't read the newspaper. He wasn't watching television, listening to the radio. His children would come to visit him, and there was one son who didn't come that often. Well, that son was murdered, and so the remaining siblings decided not to share with the father that this brother had been murdered. And so during a visit, the father said, "Isn't it nice that all of my children are here?" And then he said, "Oh, wait a second, so-and-so is not here, he's over there." And so nobody had told him that the son had passed. Well, the Barretts had collected experiences similar to this and similar to some of the ones that I have shared with you. And a book was put out in 1926, a year after Sir William Barrett passed, and it was the first book titled Deathbed Visions. Well, what happened was Osis and my friend Erlinger, what they did, they were two psychologists from Iceland, and they decided to take Barrett's work and put together a questionnaire. So they put together a questionnaire for nurses and doctors who were at the bedside of the dying. And it had a lot of questions in it, and they set it up in such a way so that they could statistically analyze, and they could check for things like lying and just, it was a scientific piece it was beautifully put together. Now, they gave it out to thousands upon thousands upon thousands of medical practitioners here in the United States, and this was in the 60s and 70s. Now, not only did they do this in the United States, but they also did it in India. So it was a cross-cultural study. And what they found were several interesting things, and I've shared some of this already. Number one, that with the departing vision, and of course these individuals collected numerous departing visions, and their book is called At the Hour of Death. And what they checked for was this whole notion that it's the dying brain. And what they discovered was that these individuals were very, very lucid while they were having these experiences. And they would turn and they would talk to those who were sitting at the bedside with them, and then they would turn and then they would talk to the deceased relatives. So they checked for the dying brain notion, and they checked not just with that. That's just one example. And, of course, they checked with the medication issue, and they checked with the religious issue, wishful thinking, just a whole list of. And what kills me is that, okay, these studies are continuing. These studies, there's a guy in the UK named Peter Fenwick, who's a neurosurgeon, and he's also a psychiatrist. And he is a near-death researcher, and he recently did a huge study on departing visions. And so he checked for all of the same stuff that these skeptics keep bringing up. And he also found out that what they were saying was bunk. And these studies were replicated in Ireland, in Holland. Studies have been done in Italy. Even a branch of the VA hospital in California, they've done their own studies. And they've all come to the same conclusion. The dying brain does not explain it, that it's too, there's too much consistency. There's too much, how do I say this? When the brain is dying, okay, if it was just the brain, if it was just hallucinations from a dying brain, remember we talked about that earlier? Mm-hmm. It would be much more chaotic. It wouldn't be so, the consistency wouldn't be there. I recently I don't even know what I was looking for, but I found another one of these guys, these skeptics, had posted the same thing in a blog that these experiences were basically just the byproduct of a dying brain. If you look at the near-death experience, The near-death experience is the departing vision without death, physical death, okay? And the near-death experience from person to person is fairly consistent also. You have Eben Alexander, who is the neurosurgeon, neurologist who had a near-death experience and put together a book that just recently came out, I can't remember, maybe 6 months ago. And there was nothing more gratifying for me than to listen to a neurosurgeon, Harvard neurosurgeon, who had had a near-death experience describing his own encounter. He was also, previous to this, very skeptical of all of this, holding his own brain scans and talking about why his dead brain how this couldn't be a dying brain fabrication, because the components of the experience were so clear. Mm-hmm. And also, he met up with his sister. He was adopted at birth, and he met up in his near-death experience with a sister who he had never met, and he didn't have validation about who this guide was until after he had come to, and he began describing her, and somebody sent a picture of her to him. So, when you have a brain that's dying or dead, that you were talking about consciousness. Now we're getting into a different topic. Is consciousness, is it a byproduct of the mind? Is it a byproduct of the brain? Or does consciousness basically filter through our mind and brain? So is consciousness located within our brain? So would that mean it's localized? Or is it non-local? Well, if it's non-local, that would explain why the person having the near-death experience can be flatlined and have no brain activity, and have a brain that is essentially muck from meningitis, but still have this experience that can be recounted in detail, or why the individual who is having a departing vision can, even though their body is slowly shutting down, why they can have these vivid experiences with afterlife content, with only deceased relatives. That's the other thing that kind of blows the whole dying brain theory out of the water, is why is it so for people who have a dying brain, they only are going to see deceased relatives and loved ones? Why is it that these individuals who are getting ready to pass on, why do they have such vivid accounts of what these individuals look like the man who shared about his grandmother in her pink traveling suit with the pink pill hat, the little box pill hats they used to wear in days gone by. So, yeah, these guys, they really do. They're really grasping for a straw here, but they can persist.
And as you mentioned, too, the death visions in that experience, it's not just limited to that person. I mean, it can happen to those around them. It seems like dying is a process that affects the consciousness of those around you as well. I mean, Matt Moniz, my co-host here, was sharing with us during the break a story about some chimpanzees. Matt, if you want to kind of share that with Carla.
Yeah, sure. If you want. There was a female chimpanzee named Dorothy in the Shangyong Chimpanzee Rescue Center in 2009 that died. And as she was being carried out, all of the chimpanzees gathered at the fence and all basically stood there in silence and with their hands on each other's shoulder watching this basically troopmate be carried out. Now, have you ever dealt with chimpanzees before?
No, I haven't. My husband
not till she
has,
talked to us.
Well, I've had a chance to interact with them before, and so, because I work.
We're three chimpanzees.
Well, but usually they're very vocal, and they almost never sit still. Generally, when in a group enclosure, and for them to do something like this is very profound. They understood, I gather from what I've read and stuff, that they knew their troopmate was dead. and the handlers had to come in and remove it. Now, what's making me wonder is, do they understand the actual significance of it? What's going to go through their heads, as this thing happens. And talking about having loved ones contact you from the other side when they died, I had that actually happen when my mother died. I actually received a physical phone call that registered on the phone right in front of other witnesses that witnessed it happen. So,
and that could be a show for a topic for a whole other show, Carla, about the phone calls that come from people. But
I can validate that for him really quickly. My editor for one of my first books, when her mother died, she received the same type of contact from her mother too.
It was weird. She died that day. I had just gotten back home from the hospital. My friend and his girlfriend had showed up on my porch to extend sympathies and that, and the phone rang, and it was a series of numbers, jumbled numbers that didn't make any sense. I answered the phone, and I distinctly, and I mean distinctly, heard my mother's voice saying, "I'm okay, Mac." And that was the name that she used to call me as a nickname, Mac. So that kind of made me step back and wonder, because I've been studying this stuff for a number of years, and I've always heard about it. I never thought I would actually experience it, but it definitely opened my eyes.
And that's exactly what happened to my editor, is that her mother told her that she was okay too. So, they're going to let us know. All we have to do is be open, and sometimes they'll even smack us across the head to get our attention. And unfortunately, isn't that wonderful that you're aware, and so you were able to take that for what it was? And but like I said before at the beginning of the show, so many people in our society, I get people who walk into the office and they'll sit down and we'll get through all the relationship junk and the addiction stuff, and then finally they'll say, I've never shared this with anybody, but here's what happened. And then they'll share something like what you just shared, or they'll share an after-death communication or a near-death experience, or a premonition, some sort of premonition, or some sort of event. And like I said, these aren't people who know what the New Age movement is. They're average people, everyday people out there, and they don't know who to talk about it with. Whereas in days gone by, when this stuff happened, it was commonplace. There's a spiritualist town in New York, and it's called Lilydale, and you guys might be familiar with it. Mm-hmm. And it's a very refreshing place because people kind of stand around, and the mediums up there, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I saw your sister," or "Oh yeah, well what were they up to?" And it's commonplace. It's like it's openly discussed, and in my circles too. When I have had contact, there was a woman who was a writer, and she got into some automatic writing and from spirit, and so I had always said to her, contact me when you get to the other side, and she did. And so I contacted this friend of ours in common, and it's just so refreshing to be able to talk to somebody who can say, "Oh, wow, yeah, did she contact you? That's really cool. That's great." As opposed to going out there in normie land and having them look at us like, "Well, are you fully sober? Have you, are you suffering from some emotional problems?" So the majority of people out there, gang, they don't have any place to go. And for your listening audience, if they're looking for places to go, there are all sorts of resources out there. There are places where they can go.
Well, one of the things that I find most fascinating about these stories is the fact that, very rarely is it ever a negative experience for anybody. It's always a positive experience to have these loved ones come back and to have these visions. And it just shows that once we get beyond this world, whatever lies ahead of us, it just shows us how mundane and how, I guess you could say, almost just of little value what we're doing here really is, because there's so much more beyond this. And
how trivial.
Yeah. I mean, it really is when you look at it. When you see when you hear about these types of reports, it just goes to show you that the life that we're living, the problems that we have, that we put so much weight on, and it turns out in the end, everything is a lot more positive and uplifting than it may seem here. And I don't think I've ever heard of a negative encounter on a deathbed. Have you?
Well, some people will really fight. I'm going to tell you a real quick story. My mother-in-law, she lost her mother in Auschwitz, and she lost a lot of her family in Auschwitz. Her father was in Siberia, and her sister and brother were in Auschwitz, and she was stateside. She and my father-in-law had gotten to the States just before the war broke out. And so she had a lot of old wounds that she never healed from. She was a very, very liberal professor at a university who, and during her time to be a female and be the chair of she was a French professor, so she kind of like steamrolled all the guys. But when I wrote my first book on departing visions, she was afraid to read it because she was afraid she wasn't spiritual enough, which was kind of funny because all the other books, she'd like go through them with a red pen and correct all the mistakes after they were published. Well, we moved my in-laws down to be closer to us, and we're able to be with them on a daily basis. And my father-in-law, of course, he had a dry sense of humor. He was from he was Lithuanian, and he went back and rounded up all the relatives in the camps and brought them back to the States. And he just had a very wicked sense of humor. He died on a Friday the 13th, the day after Hanukkah, so that he wouldn't upset his sons. After the 10 o'clock news, in my husband's arms. I mean, he was just a stitch. So, dying on a Friday the 13th, we just kind of cracked up over that. But my mother-in-law, she was a whole different story. When it came time for her to pass, she fought it. We die as we live. So she was very controlling. About her passing, and so she started calling out to him with his nickname Malpa, which is Yiddish Polish for monkey. That's what she used to call him. And when she started calling for Malpa and started talking to him, boy, Michael and I were like, we were so relieved. We thought, wow, maybe she's going to have some peace now, and she's not going to be so scared. But she began to fight with him, and so she kept saying, not now, I'm not ready, I don't want to go. And when people have departing visions, it's not unusual for them to begin speaking in the tongue of their childhood. So if it's German, they speak German. If it's Polish, they speak Polish. And so my mother-in-law was Polish and Yiddish, so she started speaking Polish, and so we could not understand what the deal was, and we kept saying, it's okay, you'll be safe, go with Pop. Well, she kept fighting with him. She fought with him for an entire day, and of course, hospice wanted to load her up on meds, and we, moved hospice out because my mother-in-law was not in pain. She was emotionally distressed because she didn't want to go with my father-in-law. And we couldn't figure out what the deal was. Well, one day, on the day after a day of arguing, the following day, we noticed that she was suddenly very calm and very peaceful, and she was talking actually we had to get her sister to come and interpret because we didn't know what she was saying. But what we discovered was that she was talking to her mother who had died in Auschwitz.
Wow.
So that's what she was waiting for. And once her mother came to get her, she was ready to go. And so she was ready, and she was talking to both Pop, her mother, and to us all at the same time. She was not in physical pain. She was not on a bunch of meds. She was real ready to move on. And so I always wake up when people close to me pass on, and I know that they have passed on. I've always done that. And so I woke up and told Michael, we better make a phone call because I think your mom just passed. And she did. She passed very, very peacefully. So, but I think that because our family is so aware of this, that is the reason why we were able to go through that process. I mean, with my own son, who was 16 at the time, after his grandmother passed, he said he wanted to see her. And in our tradition, we don't embalm. We just we just don't do that. We bury within 24 hours. And so we decided, okay, sure. So we were there with him. He took one look at his grandmother's body, and he said, "Yep, no one's home," and turned around and walked out. And then he had an after-death communication in a dream form with his grandfather. So,
well, I hate to cut you off, Carla, but we're actually we're against the clock here. We're running out of time. We're on our last minute. So I do want to thank you for joining us, and hopefully you can join us again sometime. We can talk about this even more.
Oh, no problem. I didn't even look at the clock.
I didn't either till just now. I was having such a great time with the discussion, but yeah, we are out of time. Again, Carla Wills-Brandon is our guest. You can check out all of her books, including the latest Heavenly Hugs, Comfort, Support, and Hope from the Afterlife on our website, carlawillsbrandon.com. It'll be linked up on the front page of SpookySouthCoast.com as well. Thanks so much for joining us, Carla. We'll talk to you soon. And for everybody else out there, again, no show next week because we are going to be at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. But until the next show, we want you all to stay spooktacular.
The station that